Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon, and we've got an update on the BRZRKR comic book. The controversial, non-controversial comic book crowdfunding campaign that was on Kickstarter that Boom Studios launched that stars Keanu Reeves. It's apparently a pitch for a movie or TV series or something. Anyway, it sold over 600,000 copies, apparently. What the hell? What the hell in this market? This comic book, this crowdfunded comic book has sold over 600,000 copies. Now that's not on Kickstarter. That is actually comic shop orders, bookstore orders, whatever. But this is incredible that this comic has sold this many copies, especially in this market, this down market, this comic book industry Armageddon that we've been talking about. And what's really interesting about BRZRKR is that the comic book industry has tried to cancel this book. They tried to cancel BRZRKR because they didn't think that a company like Boom should be using a platform like Kickstarter. The Kickstarters for poor people with little projects, and we've seen Todd McFarlane use it. We've seen Boom use it successfully twice, not just for BRZRKR, but they've also got Mighty Morphin Power Rangers out there. They're doing a hardcover set. This is probably going to be the new normal for the publishers that want to survive, that they're going to take to crowdfunding or, doing orders directly to consumer through their websites. It's definitely a paradigm shift. People who want comics are going to get comics. And we saw this with the Indiegogo movement too, where we had a lot of creators going to Indiegogo and crowdfunding hundreds of thousands of dollars and selling direct to consumer. So even if the comic shops are closed, this is very unfortunate for comic shops. I mean, really it is. I don't know how many of these are direct to consumer, how many are comic shops. We're going to look at this. But it shows that there's still a demand for comics if it's the right kind of comic, if the comic gets enough buzz, and if you can get it into people's hands, people will buy comic books. Again, I find this absolutely poetic that the comic book industry tried to cancel BRZRKR. They did not think that Boom should be using crowdfunding for its books, and I think all the buzz around it actually made this book blow up more. So I got to give thanks to Geeky for finding this morning. Now, she doesn't really care about comic shop numbers so much, so I guess I'm on my own for this one. But before we get into it, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We're over 175,000 subs. Thank you for the support. It's much appreciated. And yeah, we've been watching the crowdfunding scene in the comic book industry for years now on this channel. We do talk about a lot of other things, including the animation industry, including general pop culture. But BRZRKR was a very interesting case because BRZRKR was under fire from a lot of independent comic book creators because Boom decided to use Kickstarter for the campaign. Now, Todd McFarlane had used Kickstarter for Spawn, and he had done very, very well. Again, we have a whole bunch of creators who went to Indiegogo because Kickstarter at one point was gatekeeping comic book creators based on their personal politics. But the woman that was in charge of that apparently got gone, but she is voicing her concern that Kickstarter is letting companies like Boom come in and make tons and tons and tons of money, both for the publisher and for the creatives working on this book, and for Kickstarter, which Kickstarter needs. They laid a bunch of people off last year. They definitely need the boost. But we had this hit piece going around on the Daily Dot that Keanu Reeves' graphic novel is coming under fire for daring to go to Kickstarter. We had Christopher Sabella saying, if a publisher won't invest the money in a book by one of the biggest movie stars going right now, imagine how little they'll invest in a book by a creator trying to make a name. Now, I do agree that Boom underpays a lot of their people, but you also have to look at the economics of that. Are these books actually generating enough money to pay people decently? And a lot of the indie titles, a lot of the boombox titles, they do not. They do not sell more than a couple of thousand copies if they're lucky. And, the page rates, reflect that. And a lot of them are creator owned too. They talk about Giant Days. I know that's creator owned. And the publisher's pay rates are not good. I know people that have worked for Boom in the past, and this has always kind of been the case. But again, not to make apologies for that, but they are a business, and Keanu Reeves is going to bring people to the table. And, he has. They're talking about some other publishers that raise funds through Kickstarter, like Iron Circus. And I know she pays a $5 per page bonus for every extra 5,000 on Kickstarter. This rewards the creators. Now, Ross Ritchie from Boom said, "We're not kickstarting Berserker. We're not raising money. We've got the money for it." This is probably meant to highlight how they're using Kickstarter as a sales platform rather than a traditional crowdfunder. However, it also suggests a double standard for how Boom will treat a Keanu Reeves project versus a normal comic from a team of underpaid freelancers. That is business. Unfortunately, Keanu Reeves is going to bring more people in. He is, because he's Keanu Reeves. And I think all the drama around this is what helped push this to 600,000 copies. And yeah, Boom doesn't need the money to print it, but the extra sales are nice and the perks are nice, and people are going to start using Kickstarter as more of a sales platform if it's allowed. Now, this is kind of what Kickstarter transitioned into back in the early 2010s, but then we had them reorganize the company into a public benefits corporation, and they had a union that came in and said, no, we only want to basically do charity work. And we had Camilla Zhang, who was in charge of comics projects, and she actively turned people away, as I understand it, or people within that group that did projects turned people away. We know that Richard Meyer's Jawbreakers comic, which is basically a 90s style G.I. Joe image type comic, was turned away from Kickstarter, not because of the content, but because some people at Kickstarter did not like his YouTube videos. And we saw a lot of other creators go to Indiegogo because of that. And Kickstarter had to notice that they were losing a ton of money because a lot of creators with sizable YouTube platforms were going over to Indiegogo and not using Kickstarter. And I gotta be honest, my own feelings on Kickstarter at this point is I don't know if I would go all in with them anyway, because I don't know if they can be trusted. We've seen them pull the rug out from underneath people before. Now, we do not have really any controversial opinions, but some people don't like our channel because we're brutally honest. You can agree or disagree with us. And I could potentially see problems over there at some point that could possibly manifest in us getting canceled. And I don't want to do that. So anyway, here we go. This is coming from CBR. Berserker #1 is the best-selling comic since Marvel's Star Wars #1 in 2015. Now remember, they needed a loot crate for that. The first issue of Keanu Reeves' Berserker comic has sold over 600,000 copies. You know, they throw a ticker tape parade for any Marvel or DC book that sells over 100,000 copies these days. A record only beaten by Star Wars #1. Berserker artist Ron Garney, again a Marvel guy, posted the news on his official Facebook page, extending his gratitude to the rest of the creative team. Garney wrote, "Berserker #1 has surpassed over 600,000 copies. Thank you to everyone for the amazing enthusiasm and support for this project on behalf of myself, Keanu, Matt, Kay, Ross, Eric, Bill, Philip, Steven, Matt G, and all of the stellar people at Boom." The highest selling comic of the last decade was Star Wars 1, which debuted following Disney's acquisition of Lucasfilm in 2012. It exceeded 1 million copies, but the snag there is a lot of those copies were thrown into Loot Crate, as I understand it. It made it the top-selling single issue of the past 20 years. So this is Keanu Reeves and Matt Kint. Berserker follows the life of an immortal mercenary who undergoes black ops missions for the U.S. government. In addition to co-creating Berserker, Reeves will also co-write the series. The project had a massively successful Kickstarter campaign and will feature a series of variant covers signed by Reeves himself. Now, you know this is just a movie pitch, right? You know they're totally going to make a movie of this or a Netflix show or something. That's what they're going for. But damn it, that is good. And their attempts to cancel Berserker failed. Again, we had a lot of artists complaining about it, and now they're complaining about Power Rangers too. That Boom is out there making all kinds of money with Power Rangers. We did a video on that just a couple of weeks ago, that how dare they sell comics successfully using household names like Keanu Reeves and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. How dare they sell them on Kickstarter? Kickstarter's for poor people. But the thing is that we've mentioned before, Geeky and I talked about this before, just because they're coming to Kickstarter to back your Power Rangers book or to back a Keanu Reeves book doesn't mean they're coming to Kickstarter to back your book. And that seems to be a disconnect with people. They think that Kickstarter is the marketplace. They think it's like a flea market. And yeah, people may come in and they might back something else, but a lot of times they're coming in, they're using the platform like they would a Shopify store or a PayPal card or whatever to buy a specific item. And in this case, it's something that already has the brand recognition like Power Rangers and Keanu Reeves, right? So again, a lot of people have been covering the attempts to cancel it. The comic book industry professionals that are very salty about Boom using Kickstarter in this way. And I think, good on Kickstarter. I mean, they got rid of Camilla Zhang. I don't know how much of a problem she was over there, but their crowdfunding has gone through the roof since she's gotten gone. Because it seems to me like Kickstarter is like, yeah, we like money. We'll take money. We'll take money. We don't need the activists to tell us what projects we can and can't have on this platform. As long as they're not violating terms of service, we will gladly take Keanu Reeves money. We will gladly take Power Rangers money and Todd McFarlane money. So some of the complainers on Twitter, we've got Gail Galligan. I do need you to know that I'm absolutely cackling at the idea of a major comic book publisher which has deals with Netflix and Universal hopping on the Kickstarter to fund their Keanu Reeves written comic book. For some reason, page rate increases aren't in the stretch goal. I'm sure those guys working on that book are getting page rate increases. Again, comics is weird in the fact that there's a lot of disparity. You've got there's a lot of despair too. There really is. There's a lot of despair in comics right now. But you've got your X-Men books, your Spider-Man books, your Batman books, your Berserkers, and then you've got people like way at the bottom of the food chain that are lucky if they sell 1,000 copies of a book. You can't pay them what you're paying somebody who's drawing X-Men. I mean, that's just the truth of it. With Boom doing a damn Kickstarter like they're not a massive company with a huge pre-existing following and Netflix deals, it's a great time to remind everyone I was paid $20 US per inked page during my run on Giant Days. Giant Days doesn't sell a lot, and it's a creator-owned book. I think it's a guy who did Bad Machinery, if I'm not mistaken, a webcomic, does Giant Days, and it's a creator-owned book. You're not going to get paid much. You're not. I'm furious. 4 years ago, I spent doing everything you can imagine under the sun, comics-wise, for that company, making raisins, and now they don't even want to pay for their own publications. The calculation, I'm disgusted. They're looking at it as pre-orders. I don't know about y'all, but I'd really like an answer here. How is using a platform meant for people to kickstart projects they can't afford okay for a company who admits they don't need the money? That is the problem. People's definition of Kickstarter varies. Some people view it as charity, and some people view it as a marketing platform. And I think Kickstarter just at this point wants the money. Again, they had to lay a bunch of people off. I think they're going to take whatever money they can get. And even if Kickstarter would say, hey, we don't want these mega projects, comics projects anymore, it would be very easy for Boom or Todd McFarlane to go over to Indiegogo now, because thanks to a bunch of YouTubers, Indiegogo is a viable comics platform. Or they could just start their own website like Hasbro's done. Hasbro has Hasbro Pulse. They basically kickstart their own stuff through their website, taking pre-orders. I know Squishables does it too, like the little plushies. They do it too. A lot of people are kind of crowdfunding their own stuff through their own website. So Boom at this point could very easily just be like, yeah, you know what? Why are we giving Kickstarter anything? We'll just go do it ourselves. And you know what's going to happen? These people are still going to complain. They're going to be like, we can see the dollar amounts. We can see the dollar amounts that you're making. You need to give us more, even if our books aren't even paying for themselves. And that's what happens in cases like this. A lot of times these books aren't even paying for themselves. Sometimes you have higher selling books that are basically towing the line for all the underperforming books. Look at Marvel. If it wasn't for X-Men and Spider-Man, Deadpool, whatever, the rest of the Marvel line probably wouldn't get published because it doesn't even pay for itself. And you start breaking down the page rates, what they're paying people, what the printing costs are, what the shipping costs are, what the storage costs are. It doesn't even out. It really doesn't. This is Katie Farina. She goes on to say that $350,000 one day for a project they knew would succeed, didn't need the money for, was despicable. I don't think it's despicable. I think it's business. I'm so heartbroken by my experience in the comics industry, and that is 100% because of Boom. No, it's because you worked really cheap, dude. I don't know what to tell you. I'm extremely lucky I managed to jump ship into animation. Otherwise, I might still be trapped in a tenement apartment cranking out 22 pages in 2 weeks for maybe $1,000. Comics is, for the most part, that's the reality. I mean, I've talked to people about that before. I myself worked on some fairly high profile books. I actually have I guess I can brag and say I've only worked on Eisner winning titles, because that's for the most part true. Like my professional work, it's been mostly Disney comics and mostly archival Disney comics, or the Gemstone Scrooge books or whatever, all the stuff that actually won the awards. And I got paid jack shit. I really did not get paid very much any place I worked, because the money just wasn't there. It didn't matter how many awards you got. If the sales aren't there, even if you're working on something that's award winning, you're not going to get paid. Even if you win an award, you're not going to get paid that much. The money for most people is not there in comics, just like any other entertainment industry. It's the top 5% or 1% that are making most of the money that basically pulls the rest of the industry up. I don't know why this is so hard to understand. And it is unfortunate that Boom doesn't pay their people more. I think they should. But again, you're a freelancer, you're an independent contractor, you can say no. You have the right to say no. You can say, no, that sounds like a shitty deal. I've renegotiated page rates before. I've done covers for IDW, and I've negotiated a better deal. They lowballed me at first, and I held out and got the maximum amount of money, because they're going to try to get you as cheap as they can. It is what it is. Anyway, they tried this before and it worked. And that's why I think they're so emboldened to do it now is, back in 2015, they tried to get Archie to cancel their crowdfunder. They had a $350,000 goal. I don't think they were going to make it, but they had, some pretty big creators working on it. Adam Hughes, Chip Zdarsky back in the day, Dan Parent. And they took it down because the media blasted them. They're like, Kickstarter's for poor people. You're not allowed to use Kickstarter, Archie. You should be ashamed of yourself. You're literally taking hamburgers from poor Jughead. How dare you? But that's not actually what's happening. And it seems specific to comic book people. We mentioned before, look at Hollywood, Veronica Mars, Reading Rainbow. They didn't need the money either. Mystery Science Theater 3000 did a Kickstarter, but you didn't see people bitching about it like they are in comic books, at least not to the extent that I've seen. So we've got some people out there complaining that basically Kickstarter is taking from them, and I don't see it that way. I really don't see it that way. I think that they're smart. They're using a pre-existing platform, but Boom probably has one hell of a mailing list. They can absolutely drum up as many people as they need to buy these books, and they're offering premium products. There's nothing wrong with what they're doing. I don't think it's taking from anyone. It really isn't, because really the way that Kickstarter works, the way that Indiegogo works, any of these platforms, is you have to bring your audience to that platform. They're banking on it. Patreon too. It's not their job to market you. You have to build an audience, and then this is a platform that lets you give your audience extras or sell stuff to your audience or whatever. But if you don't have the audience, just putting your stuff on Kickstarter or Indiegogo is not going to work. It isn't. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see if this is how everything changes. And again, what I am worried about in this, to some degree, is that comic shops are going to get cut out. Because at some point, it's not going to make sense to sell to comic shops if you can sell direct to consumer for full price. Just kind of like what Disney's doing. If you look at Disney with Disney Plus is Disney's direct to consumer, but the movie theaters would be their version of the comic shop. They're letting the theaters run their movies so that theaters can get a cut, but it really isn't necessary when they can just sell direct to consumer. And that's probably where things are going. But yeah, we've got people here freaking out. Four Color Comics. I don't know what upsets me more, the fact that Boom is making comics via Kickstarter, or the fact that you guys are giving them 1,500% of what they asked for. It's freaking Power Rangers. It's Power Rangers. It sells itself. There's a lot of Power Rangers fans, a lot of Keanu Reeves fans. I'm waiting for Berserker times Power Rangers, Berserker X Power Rangers. That's going to be a thing, right? That'll probably be a thing. They'll sell like 700,000 copies. I don't know. Interesting conversation that needs to be had, I think, in the comic book industry, because if anybody wants to make a living in comics, this looks like the way forward. And you're either going to get on this train or you're going to get left at the station. I don't know what to tell you. Going to wrap it up. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, and we'll talk later.